Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Melissa Rich. You are listening to Taking Care of Your Temple podcast. This is episode number 50, and I'm calling this one Taming the Tornado, Strategies for Thriving Amidst Difficult Relationships. And we'll get on to our main topic here in just a little bit. But first, I want to give you all some of the stuff that I say at the beginning of every episode, just to kind of, if this is your first time, to let you know where I'm coming from, what's going on. The objective of this podcast is to help women and men, because I do have some male listeners, connect with God regularly and to use his grace, power, strength, might, wisdom, everything to help them improve their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And there are 4 principles that I've come up with to do this. And there may be other ones as well, but these are the ones that I really am aware of and have been aware of because of my experience. The first one is to keep our focus on God. This is something that sounds so simple, so obvious, and can be very hard to do because we are highly distractible. So it's a process. You have to keep pulling your attention back on track, back on track, back on track. So that's the first one. Next, acknowledging that we are not enough on our own. This is something that was harder for me when I was younger. At the ripe old age of 66, I have learned I need God's help, like in everything. I have no pride when it comes to that. I will go to him at the first necessity that comes up and ask him for his help. And I'm fine with that. And, the good thing is he wants me to do that. He's not going to help me if I don't ask him for it. He's not going to, force it on me. But once we ask for his help, he's happy to provide it. So, hey, why not ask? Next is to remember it is about progress, not perfection. A lot of times we have unrealistically high expectations of ourselves, and then we beat ourselves up when we don't meet those expectations. But the reality is, ladies, as long as we are moving forward, we're doing good. You're not going to move forward perfectly. Not going to happen. But as long as you're moving forward and learning and getting better, you're on the right track. That's what God wants us to do. And then the last thing is to work on consciously changing our thoughts. There's a huge amount of research going on all over the country, possibly all over the world, about the importance of the messages that we give to ourselves. Why do they matter? Because, so glad you asked, if our messages regularly are toxic, negative, and defeating, guess how we feel? Defeated and hopeless, anxious, depressed, stressed, whatever. Not that we will never feel that way if we do give ourselves good messages, but we will lower the times of that happening. So if you are not giving yourself positive messages, start doing that. And if you're not sure where to start, just look online, do an online search for positive messages to give myself about anxiety, stress, whatever it is, and just start giving yourself some of those on a regular basis. So the verse for this podcast is, and I just tossed it on the floor. Yes, 1 Corinthians 3:16. I know the verse. I couldn't remember the reference. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? I thought that was very appropriate for this podcast because that really is what we're talking about. All right, I'm going to start us off with a prayer, and then we will get going. Lord, thank you for giving me this platform, and thank you for these people who are listening. I ask that what I am saying will be a blessing to them, that it will be helpful, and maybe if they're stuck, that it will help them to move forward, because we all have difficult people in our lives. Help us to learn how to deal with them better. Thank you for your love, Lord. Amen. Okay. So my goal is to do this podcast weekly. And hey, number 50, I'm doing pretty good. And to give you guys some good tools and some tips that help you feel and function better. Sometimes on the podcast, I have guests. Sometimes it's just me. Today, you all are blessed to have just me. Okay, we're going to talk about difficult people. This is something that I think everybody listening to this podcast, I can say with some assurance, has had to deal with or maybe dealing with right now, or both. Because difficult people are everywhere, and we all have to deal with them from one time to another. So I want to talk about this. What are some things that difficult people do that make them difficult people? Here we go. One is they may have a negative attitude. They may be very pessimistic, a lot of complaining, spotting the downside in every situation. Now, I have dealt with people like that, and it is discouraging. I mean, I get to the point where I don't even want to talk to them because everything I say, they bring in something negative. And it's like, really? And I do. I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to talk to you. So that can be difficult. Another is manipulation, using guilt, emotional manipulation, maybe, ridicule, whatever. And a lot of times it's at other people's expense to get them to do things that they want you to do. So back when I was doing therapy, I had a client. She and her husband came in, and the issue they were having was my client's mom, because the mom was a born manipulator. She'd done it all the client's life, and the client had gotten better about it, but they were getting ready to go to a family reunion, and they knew mom was going to just zero in on her because they didn't have kids yet. That was one of the mom's big things. She wanted them to have kids so that she could manipulate grandkids too. Yeah, people are fun. Anyway, so they were already stressing out about this. What are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? And so we talked about it for a while. And what we came up with is, okay, we're gonna make this a game here, because part of the issue was they were already so stressed and tense and anxious, hadn't even left for the trip yet, that they knew the closer it got, the worse it was going to be. So what we came up with is that they were going to be driving to this reunion. As they were driving, they were going to be compiling a list in the car. Whoever was not driving was going to be writing down, and they were going to make a list of the things that they thought the mom would say to them. For everything that she said that they had on their list, they got a point. If they got over so many points, I forgot what it was, then on the way home, they got to stop for ice cream, some type of reward like that. Okay, so they did. And they were telling me about this the next session. They're on their way. They're making their list. They have it all written down. They get to the reunion, see people, hi, hello, see mom. And sure enough, almost instantly, she starts saying the things. Well, in the past, that would have just made them tense and anxious and stressed and defensive. Do you know what they were doing? They were laughing and giggling, kind of poking each other. After a while, mom noticed and said, what is going on? What are you two doing? Okay, here is where they went totally off script on me. I had just told them to make the list. What did they do? They tell mom about it. We went to a therapist and she told us to do this, to make a list of all the things that you always say that are really negative. And she goes, I don't do that. They went further off script. They pulled out the list and showed it to her. And they showed her the check marks they had for the things that she had been saying that they knew she would say. Well, mom was pretty well speechless for the rest of the trip. She couldn't think of anything to say, and it totally diffused the situation for them. So that is one way to handle that type of thing and not allow that negativity to impact you. Use some type of humor on it. It worked really well for them. Okay, something else is being passive aggressive. Boy, a lot of people who are difficult are great at being passive aggressive. And what that means is these people indirectly express hostility, anger, or resentment through these kind of subtle behaviors. They use a lot of sarcasm or the silent treatment. Basically, what these people do is by the things that they say and the things that they do, they put you in a no-win situation. There is nothing you can do that's going to be right. And of course, that's what they want. Stubbornness. Sometimes they are just refusing to consider other viewpoints, to compromise, to change their mind, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary of whatever it is that they're saying. They are digging their heels in. Also, along with that, they can be very inflexible. They are resistant to change, to new ideas, or to adapting to different circumstances. Another one that I find very frustrating is blame shifting. These people just avoid responsibility for their own actions, and they consistently place the blame on other people. So back when my late husband Ed was in dental school, I was friends with another girl, I'm not going to say her name, although I doubt that she'd be listening to this. But anyway, she was married to another dental student in Ned's class. And so we became friends, and we would meet together to run or to walk or, do things like that. Okay. What was I doing then? I think I was done with my master's in counseling at that point. It's been a while. I've slept since then, but I think that's where I was. But even with that, I have never been one to give advice that's unsolicited because people don't appreciate it. So I tend to not do that. But as we would be walking and running together, this woman, I'm going to call her Sarah. That was not her name, but Sarah would consistently start telling me all these terrible things that had happened. And I don't know what to do. What do you think? What should I do? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, I don't give advice unless people ask, but she was asking me. So I would say things like, well, what if you tried blah, blah, blah? Or have you thought about XYZ, whatever? What I discovered, and I wasn't far enough along in experience to figure out what she was doing, but it was driving me crazy. There was always a reason why she could not follow my good advice that she had asked for. Because what she would say is, yes, but I can't do that because blah, blah, blah. Or, yes, but that wouldn't work because da, da, da. We call these people in therapy yes butters. She yes butted everything I said to her. And y'all, it was driving me nuts because she asked for help. I was giving her really good advice, if I do say so myself, and she was just discounting all of it. It got to the point that it bothered me so much that I just started pulling back from our friendship. And I just wasn't hanging around with her anymore. So, that's one way to handle it. I don't know now if it's the best way. I've learned a few things since then, but at that point, that was the best that I could do. Drove me nuts. Narcissism. I've talked about narcissists this is episode number 50. It's been a while back. But narcissists really focus on themselves. They don't have much empathy for other people, and their needs come before everybody else's. Yeah. And we all feel that way at times. Okay. Let's be real. But most of us don't live there. These people do. So that's a difficult person. Dishonesty, lying, withholding information. These are things that kind of erode trust. You get to where and I've known people like that. I'm sure you have too. So when they tell you something, you're thinking, I wonder if that's really true. That's kind of sad. And I've thought that in the past. I don't want to be someone who people think that when I'm telling them things. But there are a lot of people who I know who anything they tell me, I have to take it with a grain of salt because I just don't know if it's true or not. Oh, here's a big one. Interrupting and or dominating conversations. Habitually talking over other people, not letting them speak, or monopolizing conversations. I've known people who do this, especially the interrupting drives me nuts. In fact, I had a couple in therapy years ago, and the wife would talk. How did they? Oh yeah, it was the wife. She would be talking, and the husband would just interrupt or talk over her. It was bothering me. And finally, at one point, I turned to her and said, "Does he do this all the time?" And she said, through gritted teeth, "Yes." And I said, "Does it bother you?" And she said, "Yes." And the husband looked like, "What?" Like he didn't know what it was. And I explained to him what he was doing, and he looked totally surprised. But again, if it was bothering me, I knew it had to be bothering her. So that's something to be aware of. Using anger to dominate others. I do have a really funny story about this. A friend of mine years ago was working at this company, and she got promoted to this position that was kind of dubious because the guy she was going to be working for as an assistant went through assistants like Kleenex. And the reason why is because he was a really difficult person to work for. The main thing that he did is he used anger to dominate, and he would yell at people in the office, so people just kept quitting. So she knew his reputation, she knew what was coming, and when she started working for him, it was fine for a couple of days, And then one day, third or fourth day, sure enough, they're with some other people in the company, and he just starts yelling at her. She was ready. She yelled back at him, and he looked astonished and said, well, why did you do that? And she said, oh, well, you were yelling, and I figured it was because you were hard of hearing since you're getting older. So I thought I would yell back so you could hear me. Shut him up. And he was floored, and he never yelled at her again because he knew that she was not going to take it. She would just give it right back to him. And that was the end of it. Now, he was still a difficult person, but at least he didn't do that part. So that's one way also to handle that. All right. Disregard for boundaries. A lot of people would just ignore those personal boundaries, and they make us feel uncomfortable. I have dealt with that. You probably have too. Maybe they sit too close to you, or they get in your face when they're talking again, especially these people who use anger. It's not comfortable. Here's one that drives me crazy: chronic lateness. Repeatedly showing up late for appointments or commitments, disrespecting other people's time. I grew up in Latin America, y'all, and in Mexico, and that was just the thing. Nobody was on time. When they said something would start at 8, 8:30, 8:40, and everybody knew that, so nobody bothered to get there on time. In fact, when I was there, now this was about 40 years ago, it may have changed. If people had something, a meeting or party or something that they wanted to start on time, they would do the, invitation or whatever. And at the bottom, under where it said the time, they would write tiempo americano, which meant American time, because they knew that Americans started more on time. So if you saw that, you knew, oh, okay, we're actually going to try to start at the time that it says. But I just feel like everybody has it sometimes. And sometimes I will run late. But I will tell you, what I will do is I will text someone and say, hey, I am stuck in traffic. I'm on my way. So sorry. So at least they know, because I think it's rude. It's disrespectful. And a lot of people don't do that. And I'm laughing because, I just thought about this. I had a client scheduled for like 30 minutes ago, and I'm waiting. I'm doing other things. I'm not just sitting here. Finally, because I sent him an appointment confirmation text yesterday, and he said, yeah, I'll be there. I texted him and said, hey, had us down for a session today. Do we need to reschedule? And he texted back and said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I had it down for tomorrow. It happens. But if it happens repeatedly, if it happens occasionally, I try to give people grace. If it happens repeatedly, I don't like it. Unreliability. Consistently failing to meet commitments, promises, or obligations. Y'all, this drives me nuts. And one of the things that I really hate is people who don't answer calls, texts, or emails. Again, I think it's rude. It's disrespectful. And I try to answer all of those things in a reasonable amount of time. Now, sometimes they will slip past me. Occasionally that happens to everybody, especially if you're emailing or texting. Things get lost in cyberspace. When that happens, and it has, I've seen an email from a client or something that they sent 5 days ago and just now showed up on my email feed. I will apologize immediately, get back to them. That's all you can do. An overcritical nature. Back in high school, and we had a guy, my dad was pastoring a small church in Oklahoma, and we had a guy, I think his name was Anish Sharosh. He was an evangelist, and he came to our church a couple of times. And one of the things he talks about, things in the church that he talked about, was every church has what they call the self-appointed fault finders. And they believed that God had appointed them to point these things out to people. Let me just tell you, that is not a spiritual gift. Okay? Fault finding, if that's what you do, that is not a spiritual gift. Look in the Bible. I promise you, it is not on any of the lists. So stop doing that. Competitiveness. I think this is more of a guy thing, although I've known some women too, but I think it's more guy, treating every interaction as a competition, and they want to win every single one. And I am much more about cooperation than competition. So this one also, I don't care for. A lot of these drive me crazy. Are y'all getting that? Okay, an unwillingness to listen. I don't like this one either. People who just are not going to listen to your point of view as long as it's different from theirs, to your needs or to your concerns. So communication stops, pretty much. An inability to apologize. It's hard. Apologizing and admitting that you did something wrong is no fun. Been there, done that. And I've talked about this in another podcast episode. I don't remember which one, but a lot of people apologize by saying, I'm really sorry I did blah, 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 but. Okay, pay attention here. Including a but in an apology, that is not an apology. What that is saying is, but it really wasn't my fault, or you made me do it. That is what it is saying. Don't apologize with a but. Don't do it. What you need to do is apologize with an and. I am so sorry that I did blah, 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 or didn't do blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to make every effort not to do it again. That's a good apology. Okay. That's a good one. Don't do the but. Gossiping, engaging in spreading rumors or talking negatively about others behind their backs. Yeah, that's really someone who's difficult and they're not fun to be around. And then another one is a lack of empathy, an inability to understand other people's perspective or get their feelings. Those are not fun people to be around. I mean, they just really aren't. Okay, so here are some ways that you can see people being difficult in different situations. I'm going to look at personal relationships first. One is poor communication. A lot of people have a hard time expressing their thoughts and feelings or not actively listening. And this can really cause communication to break down. If you are not paying attention to the other person, they know it. They feel disrespected. And yeah, it can really affect the relationship in a negative manner. Jealousy and insecurity. Excessive jealousy and insecurity are going to lead to trust issues and this constant need for reassurance. And that desperate need that some people have, and you all know who I'm talking about, people who are so needy that they keep coming back for more reassurance. It turns people off and it makes them pull away. It's the opposite of what the people want and need, but they are pursuing so fast and so hard and clutching so desperately that people are just like, oh my gosh, leave me alone. So it really does not accomplish what they want. Selfishness in relationships, being self-centered and prioritizing my needs over everybody else's, my spouses, my kids, my families. That does not win me any popularity contest, and it does not help the relationship. Now, I am not saying you should never address your own needs. You should. We need to. That's a healthy thing. And we also need to try to take care of other people's needs. Having said that, I am not saying that we need to completely meet other people's needs. We can't do that. God is the only person who can do that. We can help, but we can't do everything, nor can they do that for us. Keep that in mind. And that kind of goes along with this unwilling to compromise. Refusing to meet halfway or find some type of common ground can really lead to ongoing conflicts. And you've known people like this. And their mantra is kind of my way or no way. If you are not for me, you're against me. Isn't that great? Don't you love it? You can't disagree with them without being disloyal. And I've had people like that close to me. It comes through insecurity. And this is a hard one for me to get because my family growing up, probably our family motto, and there were 7 of us, I'm the oldest of 5 kids, would have been, well, I guess we're just going to agree to disagree. And everybody was okay with that. We were fine. I have said that to other people. And like, what do you mean? No, we're not going to disagree because I'm right. You have to agree with me. I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll talk about this later. So that can be really difficult. Passive aggressiveness. This is, again, expressing hostility indirectly instead of just openly talking about whatever is wrong. So I had a past relationship where someone was really like this. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on. But I would ask them, what's wrong? I mean, is everything okay? No, it's fine. I'm fine. And I could tell by the way, okay, when it's passive aggressive, there is a disconnect between what they're saying and the way that they're saying it. Their words do not match their body expression or their facial expression. So I figured out after a while what this person wanted was for me to keep saying, well, I know that something's wrong. What is it? Tell me what's going on. And so I didn't want to do that. So after a while, I figured out, and they stopped doing it around me, is I would, when I could tell something was wrong, I would ask them once, maybe twice. And if they said again, no, everything's fine, in this long suffering tone, I would just say, oh, okay, good. And then I would keep going like everything was great, because that's what they said. Drove them crazy, and they stopped doing it around me pretty much. So that is a good way to handle someone who is passive aggressive. I'm just not very good at game playing. I don't have the patience for it. Let's see. And avoiding responsibility. Y'all, blaming other people for the things that we did is always tempting, but it's not what we're supposed to be doing. God wants us to claim responsibility for our mistakes and learn from them. And it's hard, but it's one of the hallmarks of being a grown-up. It is what separates the women from the girls. So we all need to learn how to do this and do it well. In business relationships, you can have difficult people. Some of y'all have had difficult bosses. You know what I'm talking, or coworkers. Oh, I'm looking over some of the things I want to just talk about here. Poor communication is a big one in business. And so many companies, poor communication is rampant. So when I was fresh out of college, I was working for this very large company in Houston. And one of the things that I was doing was spending probably about a fourth to a third of my day writing a report. I don't even remember what it was about, but I know I was getting all this information from the company. I had to put it in a certain format, get it, take it to this other person, their office, and blah, blah. So, and I was never getting any feedback. So finally, after I'd been there probably 3 or 4 weeks, I went into my direct supervisor's office, and there were actually a couple of other people in there from the company. And I said, this report that I'm writing for Mr. So-and-so, is there any way I could talk to him about it and ask some questions or whatever? And the people in the office, I saw them all exchanging these looks like, okay, what is up? Well, finally, one of them said, no, you're not going to be able to do that. And I said, why? Someone else said, because he's dead. And I'm like, what? What happened? When? The guy had been dead about 2 weeks before I got there. I had literally been writing reports for a dead person. I kid you not. And I'm looking at them all. And finally I said, well, since he's dead, do you think I could stop writing a report? And then it gets even better because they all look at each other. No one wants to commit. And finally, one person said, we'll get back to you. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I still have to write a report for a dead person. I had to do it for another couple of days before they finally got back to me. And I could tell what it was. They didn't want to take responsibility for it. And they finally said, reluctantly, okay, you can stop writing that report. I mean, that is a prime example of poor communication. I'm pretty sure nobody was reading that report because there was nobody in his office. Anyway. Okay. Micromanagement. Have you ever had the boss who is micromanaging every single thing? It is incredibly annoying and it is not productive. That is a difficult person. Being resistant to change, being resistant to new ideas, technologies, whatever it is. This is an example can be of a difficult person. Negativity, a lot of pessimism and complaining and all this that creates this toxic work environment. So this was again very shortly out of college. I was working for, we called them a temp agency then. I don't even know if they still have them now, but I was doing basic office work. I had been sent to this office. And I was told to ask for, I don't know, Mrs. Smith. We'll make up a name. So I get in there, ask for Mrs. Smith. She's not there. And the lady who was the person under her said, okay, she's not in yet. And I always have a book with me. She saw my book And she said, I don't know why she wanted you to be here today, so I don't want you to start doing anything. She should be in a few minutes. Why don't you just sit there and read your book until she gets in? Fine. I'm always open for reading. So I'm sitting there reading my book, minding my own business, and the lady comes in. She finds out who I am, comes up to me, and starts absolutely reaming me out for being there, supposed to be working, reading a book. And I'm trying to tell her what's happening. She is totally ignoring me. The lady who told me to sit there and read my book came in and tried to tell her. She starts yelling at her. So I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to be here. So I didn't argue with her. She told me some stuff to do. I did that as soon as it was lunch break. I ran home because I didn't live very far away, called the temp company and told them what happened. And I said, you can verify this with the other lady there. And she said, no, I believe you. Don't go back. She said, I will call her. I will take care of it. And she did. But I felt so sorry for the lady who was still working there. And I was like, I am out of here. But that negativity creates a very toxic environment. Nobody wants to work in that. Okay, so casual relationships where you can have difficult and annoying people. Inattentiveness, people who you can tell are paying no attention to what you're saying. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy. Have you ever been at a party or some type of function? You're talking to somebody and you realize they are constantly looking over your shoulder or looking around the room. They're paying no attention to what you're saying. How does that make you feel? It drives me nuts. And what I typically will do is I will try it a time or two. And then if they keep doing it, I'll just say, I see somebody over there I need to talk to. Bye. And I just leave because obviously the conversation is going nowhere. Chronic lateness, being habitually late. And to me, that's disrespectful. I just think that's really rude. You all probably know people who do that. Unreliability, not following through on commitments or promises in casual friendships. I feel like that's also very disrespectful. And one of the things, although I feel it's disrespectful, I also know that sometimes life happens. So what I have gotten to the point of doing, and probably a lot of you do this too, when I look on my calendar and see I've got like a lunch date or dinner date or breakfast date with somebody the next day, I text them first and say, hey, just checking to make sure that we're still on for tomorrow, 11:30 at Panera's, whatever. And if I don't hear back from them, then I may call them. But that has saved me because a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes I have gotten back, people have gotten back to me and said, oh, I'm so glad you texted. I've had this emergency come up at work. I'm not going to be able to do it. That's fine. Okay, we'll reschedule. No problem. That's a lot better than me sitting there twiddling my thumbs and being annoyed because where the heck are they? So that has saved me, and I do recommend that. Okay, what else? So why are difficult people difficult? Well, some of them are because they can and they enjoy it. Honestly, it gives them some sense of satisfaction. I had a friend one time who, she had 2 kids. Her son was like 8, daughter was like 6. And, being the older brother, he would pick on his sister. And at one point, she was telling me she got so exasperated with him that she goes, seriously, do you do this because you enjoy it? And he thought about it for a minute. And he goes, yeah, I kind of do. I mean, at least he was honest about it. But some people do enjoy that. They do enjoy making you feel uncomfortable or upset or whatever. It is fun for them. However, and I do want to point out, at times we are all the difficult person. We are. It's just going to happen. Let's try to minimize that because it's no fun. So other than sometimes they just like to do it, here's a reason why a lot of people end up being difficult. One is they have low self-esteem. So they're engaging in these negative behaviors to try to compensate for any feelings of inadequacy or insecurity that they may have. Another is like unresolved trauma or some mental health issues. They may have some personality disorders or, I don't know, things that happened to them in the past. And I want to say here, as a therapist for 28 years, you cannot fix these people. Please don't try. I'm not saying that you can't listen to them or whatever, but you are not going to be able to fix them. You may need to recommend some professional help for them, and they need to really be able to fix themselves. And God will help them if He asks them. That is not your responsibility. We all have enough responsibility taking care of ourselves. Some people just don't have good coping skills. They don't know how to handle stress in a positive manner. They don't know how to handle those difficult emotions, so they act out. They throw things, they say mean things because they don't know healthy ways to do it. I'm not justifying it, but a lot of times they haven't had good role models. And so, they're doing what they've been taught to do. Some people also, same vein, they have poor social skills. Y'all have probably known people like that. They always say the wrong thing, open mouth, insert foot, because they don't know how. And a lot of these are people, I've noticed, people who are kind of the geeks. They are really, really smart in some areas. Social areas is not one of them. They have very poor social intelligence and social skills, or lack of emotional intelligence. They have a hard time recognizing and managing their emotions, also empathizing with other people. A lot of times, not man bashing, but a lot of men are this one. They don't read other people very well. They don't pick up on those cues as well. Now, a lot of men do learn how to do this, especially if they're married and their wives tell them, okay, here's what that meant. They get better. Okay. But honestly, I do think this is one thing that women typically do better than men. Sometimes they have a sense of entitlement. Y'all, when I was in college, I had a roommate. I don't even remember her name now. I tried to block it from my memory. I'm going to call her Linda. And Linda, first of all, was a total slob. Her side of the dorm room looked horrible. I mean, honestly, it was like there was this line down the middle. And I got to the point where I would just kick her stuff over the line because I didn't want it. I kept my side pretty neat. I've always been kind of more of a neat freak. Then she had the habit of borrowing my stuff without asking. Not only would she borrow it, she would lend it to her friends. It literally got to the point, and there were just a few things that she liked. I learned what they were. I had to have my boyfriend, who lived in the men's dorm, he kept them in his room for me, or I never had them. And the thing is, she was never there. She was always gone. So I had to leave little notes for her. Linda, where are my hair rollers? Where's my pair of jeans? Oh, she wore the jeans and she was bigger than I was. They ripped out. And I know one of the reasons she was doing this is because she had this huge sense of entitlement. She was the youngest of 6 children, the only girl. Can you say spoiled princess? Yeah. She was not a fun person to room with, let me just say. She eventually moved out. I was very happy for that. Sometimes there is grief and loss that they just haven't resolved, and they have all this emotional turmoil going on, and it's hard for them to react in a positive, healthy manner with people. Sometimes people who are very difficult, it's because they have grown up with people enabling them. A lot of parents are bad about this. They shelter their kids from the results of their behavior. They're always rescuing them. So they learn to do whatever they want because, hey, mom and dad are going to step in and fix it. Why should they worry about it? So that's not very good. It's not doing their kids any favors. Okay, so I'm going to look at. I'm going to skip ahead. Okay, so here are some things that the Bible says about dealing with difficult people. These are verses and teachings about giving each other grace, mercy, and forgiveness, even though we may not feel like doing it. Okay, so for grace, Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. Thank goodness. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one can boast. We do not earn God's grace or favor. He gives it to us. We ask him for it, and then we can receive it, but we don't do it. 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And we all are weak. And then Hebrews 4:16. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. So if we need grace for dealing with these difficult people in our lives, and at times we do, ask God for it. He'll provide it. Mercy. Matthew 5:7. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. A lot of times we do not feel like giving difficult people mercy. But again, there are times when we're going to be the difficult one and we are going to need it. And I'm a big believer in what goes around comes around. So sometimes we just need to bite our tongue and give people grace or mercy, whether they deserve it or not, because they probably don't, but then neither do we. Psalm 103:8. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. So we should be. Luke 6:36, be merciful just as your Father is merciful. You can't get much more direct than that. Forgiveness. Matthew 6:14 and 15. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. It's kind of a scary verse. Forgiveness is something we are supposed to do. Colossians 3:13, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgives you. And Ephesians 4:32, be kind and compassionate toward one another, just as in Christ, God forgave you. So again, even though we don't always feel like doing these things, being kind, being gracious to the difficult people in our lives, we are told to do it because God was so kind and gracious and merciful to us when we were so difficult and so lost in our sin, and we didn't deserve any of it. So I'm not saying this is fun. It's not my favorite thing, believe me, but I'm not telling you to do it. God is telling us all to do it. Okay. Fun fact about Waco. The third annual Dia de los Muertos parade and festival is going to be in downtown Waco, August 28th, 2023. And this is an annual event that serves to kind of bring together diverse communities in Waco and represents the city's Hispanic culture. So if you are wondering what Dia de los Muertos means, good question, I will tell you, it means the Day of the Dead. And the Day of the Dead is something that originated in Mexico. It's been going on for years and years. I'm familiar with this because I grew up in Mexico. My parents were missionaries there. So a lot of times this occurs around Halloween, sometimes on Halloween. Halloween is always October 31st. Dia de los Muertos is, I think, I have it in here somewhere, maybe not. It's usually like, I think, October 28th through November 2nd, something like that. However, Halloween and Day of the Dead are two different festivals. This celebrates the dead rather than being afraid of the dead. It's a holiday for people to honor their ancestors and loved ones who have passed away. And it's a celebration of family and a show of respect for people who are no longer with us. Rather than displaying grim or gory decorations, Day of the Dead celebrations involve paying respect to loved ones. So a lot of families go to cemeteries and they tend the graves. They trim off weeds or polish the tombstone. They plant flowers, whatever. And one of the things that you may have seen is people turn themselves into skeleton using this elaborate makeup and masks. They highlight that with flowers, bright colors, and artwork. And they have these decorated spun sugar skulls that are left on altars as offerings, and they're sweets that the kids can eat. They also have pan de muerte, bread for the dead. So they have foods and rituals and all these things associated with it. So Dia de los Muertos in Waco kicks off with a parade in downtown Waco. And the festivities will continue into the evening with free entertainment and activities, local art, traditional folklorico dancers, and a collection of musical performances. So it's just a cool thing that probably we do more in Texas than anywhere else because us being so close to Mexico, maybe California too. I don't know. But I just thought that was a fun fact that you all might be interested in. Okay. So along with this podcast and Waco Hypnosis Center, which I own and operate, I am available for public speaking. If you are interested in having me for an event, you can contact me through my website at www.drmelissarich.com, or you can email me at info@drmelissarich.com. And y'all, if you enjoyed this, I'd love for you to like the podcast or follow it. Or if you have any questions about anything that you've heard, you can email me. And I'm happy to answer your email. So just kind of letting you know, I am very appreciative that you are listening, and I hope that you will come back next week. And I am coming up on episode 52, which I'm doing something special for because that will be 1 year. So I'm glad that you all were here today. Thank you for joining me, and I'd love for you to come back next week.